Right. Brenda, it's great to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, Adam. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, no, you're welcome. It's great. It's great to have you on, and I just kind of thought I'd introduce you and talk about how you kind of got into what you do because you're the president of Inspiring Company Culture, and you help like people and businesses and teams of people, to kind of unlock their potential and get better results. How did you kind of like get into this kind of field, and what's it kind of involved in what you do?
hmm So it actually came from two perspectives. One was personally, as my career was progressing, um, it was going along well. So I don't want to say it was a bad career, but it felt limited, and I was thinking, how can I change the result? So how can I get more? How can I be better or involved in conversations that would help me get promoted or to the next level. And then I wanted the same thing for the team that I managed, because I thought, well, if it's happening to me, not that I'm limiting their growth, but they're also limited to their exposure of how they can develop themselves. And I thought, God, how can we do this? We got to be able to do this in a better way. And the company I was working for was, it has its bits and fits of being a little toxic every once in a while, because they would acquire another company and then you try to, smush all the people together and who's actually in charge. And it just seemed like just a mixture of people trying to one up each other or try to put somebody else down. That's just not really being collaborative and working as a full team. So I said, this, no, this is not enjoyable. So how do we change
Yeah,
this? And that's how I got into changing it for my team and what kind of tools and techniques to make it better for my team. And then I think by accident in a way, but intentional in another, it's that positive peer pressure that other people see how much we as a team enjoy working together, and they're like, "What? Why are you guys so happy?" Right? If people want to know that, they see that little spark of excitement or happiness, and they're like, how do you do that? How can I be a part of that? Right? So you kind of create this magnet of people want to learn more about how to create a healthy culture. Everybody's involved, everybody's for each other, meaning we work together really, really well. And we're there for each other's development and growth as a team. And by doing those different, implementing different techniques, then, I was able to get my team. We still had vacations and holidays and everything that we needed to do, but we saw 20% increase in our productivity, or the amount of stuff we were able to get done that was meaningful stuff, not just stuff randomly. Um, and I had no voluntary turnover, where it was different because the rest of the company was running about 20-25% turnover, voluntary turnover. There's people like, I have enough of this, and they're out. Um, so we, definitely created something that was very special there in that company. And now what I do is, because I love doing that so much, I just replicate it with other people in other teams. It doesn't matter really the size of your company. If this is just something that you want, do you want that goodness to kind of spill over into everybody? That's what I help people do, figure out how to do that.
yeah. I think that's definitely key, in society today, and that can be the make or break. I think for a lot of different companies based on their staff and how the employees feel, when they arrive at work, and that balance. And especially in the corporate environment, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of targets that need to be met. So I think, as you said, to try and have that fine balance where where people are happy in their workplace, and if they're, I'm sure you've noticed, if people are happier in their job, they're going to perform better for the company, and the company is going to do better as well. And I think, like, especially now, there's a lot of pressure on people and people's mental health. And I think, like you said, to strike that balance where people being appreciative for what they do as well.
Exactly. And I guess I would say I had the benefit that we were remote, and I say it's a benefit because I think people now were recently forced into being remote teams where you all aren't working together. Um, but it's a different dynamic, but you can still create that culture where everybody's for each other and just that collaborativeness. We were spread across different time zones and in actually different countries, but still were able to get stuff done and seemed as if we were neighbors, or office mates or whatever, even though we weren't. And it's just, that this sharing that ability to do that and to get that understanding of what makes each one of us individually tick and what made us excited and what made us sad, meaning I don't want to do that. I'm really bad at this one thing and I hate doing it. Please don't ever ask me to do that.
Hmm.
And helping us balance that out because I had people in a team that one person's, oh, I hate that was another person's, ooh, I love that. I will do that all day. I will literally do that, hour after hour. And some of us were like, ooh, really? Okay, well then here, we'll let you handle it. So it's finding that spark that makes people really get into sync and highly effective.
Yeah, exactly. And would you say, like, the communication with, your employees and getting to know them is quite a big thing, in the workplace and business. I think, like, from my own personal experience, I've worked in some places where, the managers or certain people don't really get to know you, or they don't really appraise you. So you kind of, you don't feel as great compared to probably some other jobs where you might be praised, or your manager or your boss takes an interest in you, gives you that support and communicates with you. And I've had this conversation with a few people who, been feeling unhappy, and they're like just wanting to be praised, or to have that positive kind of regard from, someone in the hierarchy to tell them they're doing a great job, or, to take that interest in them. And I think it's so important. I think it's like one of our needs as a person, isn't it? We want to be appreciated for our work and what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of our human fundamental needs is that need for significance. And I don't mean that, oh, I'm the expert and I'm the center of the universe. It's just that acknowledgement that, hey, I'm here, I exist, and I am actually contributing to your team in a meaningful way. Whether that's your team, your community, your family, whatever, I think, that kind of expands out. That people just want to hear that every once in a while, not be taken for granted, but have that appreciation and that acknowledgement that yes, I'm here, and yes, you value me. Um, it's so important. I read a study, I think it was from 2018, that mentioned that when people decide to leave their job, the reasons that they cite when they leave, oh, I want more money, or this firm or this company, whatever, offered me more money, or they offered me, something that you didn't offer. Um, and they always put it in this kind of tangible thing that it's like it's not personal, right? But actually, if they ask them, how could we have prevented you from leaving? The number one answer was, you could have asked me that question like 3 months ago and shown that you were
Mm,
interested in having me stay.
yeah,
And it's so powerful to me. That was so powerful, such a powerful finding. It was like, yeah, we just got to get with people ahead of time.
yeah, that's it. It's just touching base with people, isn't it? I suppose, and just trying to find that, taking that little bit of your time out your day to communicate with your employees. And I think it's that time aspect, isn't it? I mean, you could talk to somebody for a couple of minutes, and that could be the difference between them, leaving the job and feeling, regarded. I mean, I remember I had it with the manager, and they was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? Because I wanted to talk to them, and then it kind of made me feel like, oh, so, I'm not important in this role. They don't care about what's going on. All of these things, and you can go on a spiral And as you said, like a lot of people sometimes might leave, and it could have been avoided based on a small conversation. But I think, like, with technology now, and like you said, a lot of people working remotely, I think there is probably a lot more kind of support and kind of that kind of community feeling, because everyone's in the same boat, aren't they? Really, if people are working remotely in company, they can all touch base in a Zoom call and that kind of thing, probably.
Well, yes, absolutely. I think, some people, it depends on if you're introverted and you get your energy from yourself and kind of self-propelled, or the extrovert who gets their energy from others. I think the remote setting definitely has a different impact on those two kind of mindsets, right? Because the introvert, it's like, okay, I'm good until I need something from you, right? The extrovert is like, I need to know there's somebody else out there. Aren't we still a team, right? They're just kind of reaching for let's connect. Um, so what I've done to kind of balance that with my teams, the first thing is that I did was is acknowledge that everybody on the team is a leader. That's not by title, right? So I'm not all into hierarchy is required because the business requires it, right? It's just the organizational structure. It's like, okay, fine. But I, because I hold the organizational title, I am responsible for a lot of other worries that you guys don't have to. And I'm the one who's going to get in trouble when things don't go well or when they do go well. I have an extra responsibility. That's all that means, like responsibility to the business related to revenue and so forth. But the entire team, everybody else, is a leader, because the way I did it was implemented to the standpoint of we have to understand our leadership voices, and there are 5 different ones. This is a different, kind of approach. You think some people know Myers-Briggs or DISC or something like that. This is a spin-off of that kind of blends a couple of them, but looks at the entire team dynamic and say, how can we succeed as a team? So I had all of us do our assessment to know what our leadership voices are. And we typically have 2 that are like our primary voices that we operate in most of the time. And as we mature in age, in experience, we get better at floating into the mode that we need to be in given the situation. But knowing those top 2 helped. Then I said, let's now talk about what your strengths are. So what do you really, really love to do? And what do you would like to learn how to do better? So that's kind of that growth, that development part, because we're going to share that as a team. Now, granted, I had a smaller team. If you have 100 people, this is much more difficult to do with. But if you have a team of less than 20, certainly you can do this. And that everybody knows what everybody else is working on, kind of their development edge. And the reason they're all leaders is they're there to support each other, right? It's like, oh, well, Adam wants to get better on this thing. Oh, okay, we can help him, right? It's not to pick on and say, oh, he's really bad at that. We're just going to pick on him about being, it's just to be there
Yeah.
for each other, in every instance. And that's what it was about. And then we had a common vocabulary or way to talk about it with each other and to challenge each other, but yet support each other. So I always made assignments based off of that challenge support type of matrix, where I would say, okay, well, Adam wants to grow in this area. So let me
Mm.
give him an assignment that will help him stretch, but also support him to be there to say, I know you're not going to do it perfectly, and I'm not expecting that, but I am here for you when you get stuck. I am your sounding board, right? I'm here to brainstorm with you. Actually, the rest of the team is here to brainstorm with you too, because they know what your growth areas are. And that's why we're all together there as leaders, right? Because now the team members step in as leaders for each other, saying, let me help you. Oh, this is something I'm really good at. So let me help you give suggestions, or let me help brainstorm with you. So, it kind of works in that way. And then when it comes to team meetings and that sort of thing, I was very intentional with the agenda. and starting with your successes or gratitude for the day where we were meeting weekly. So the weekly gratitude at the beginning and celebration. So it could be a personal celebration, like, hey, it was my birthday, woo. Or it could be a project celebration, whatever that person felt that they wanted to say. And I'll say it kept it anchored in that we are people, not just bots creating projects and being productive. We're here kind of like a family in a way, loosely related family, but still. And that's how we functioned to get through everything.
Yeah, no, I really love that, and I really resonate with that, and I think that's so key to create that kind of community and that family, kind of vibe in that workplace. And as you said, everyone has their own role, and everyone is, in some respect, like, they're a like leader in the company, and is that like driving force in the company, and you're all kind of working together, and there's that communication. And I think as you mentioned, that Myers-Briggs test, would you call it a test? Well, assessment. Um,
Uh-huh.
that's really effective, and I took that. I saw it online. I took that a few times, and it really kind of puts you into a profile, isn't it? Into like a profile of who you are and what your strengths are, and your personality, and you can really kind of identify with the role you get. Because I think I got this INFP on mine,
Mm-hmm.
and I really resonated with it, and I think it said I get bored, with tedious tasks sometimes, or certain things, and I was like, it kind of it gave me a lot of clarity, because I was like, that makes sense, like that's why I felt X, Y, Z doing X, Y, Z. And I think, as you said, to have people, knowing what their strengths are, and utilizing their strengths and their weaknesses to propel themselves forward in what they've got to do. And I think, as you said, just being there for your employees, it breaks the ice. It makes you feel it's like a safety net almost with your boss, or manager is like, I'm here for you, that, and this kind of thing.
Well, exactly. And for me, back to the why I created it, I felt that was missing for me. I didn't have that type of support. I didn't have that, um, at the level of my colleagues and my boss. That wasn't happening. So I wanted to make sure it did happen for my team. And now that I work with, small to medium-sized businesses, it's the same thing, because I know what it feels like, and we can't give a return on investment measure for what it feels like, but it feels better. And you normally see that as people don't leave you. They want to be part of your company. And then you have the opposite problem of, oh my gosh, I have more people coming to me who want to be part of the team. I can't afford to hire them yet, right? You have to
Yeah.
grow your business to bring them on. So that's a great problem to have. Um, but on the other hand, it helps you really create a highly effective team, because what I do is not just the individual, individual person's respective, INTJ, which is mine, or
Mm.
or whatever. It's blended into this 5 leadership voices, because you need all the voices on your team to be really effective. And I take a team approach. So yes, we have to have individual, right? Because we feed into that. But as
Mm.
an individual, then, I mean, as a team, collectively, where do we set? How do we unlock our capacity and potential then? Because most teams, when you put them together,
Yeah.
they're about 60% effective, maybe, generally speaking. And so I always find room that we can amp them up, meaning unlock different things about their styles to get them into 80 to 90% effective. And you would be amazed at how much, as a business, more capacity you have to take on. As a team, how much more you can, really achieve by what would seem like small tweaks. They are small tweaks, but it's the practice. You have to do these things over and over and over again to make
Mm.
them a behavior. A change is something that you do on a regular basis. It's not like, well, I'm going to do one intervention and voila, we are done. We are fixed.
Mm.
If people would only work that way, that would be great. But no, so
Yeah,
it's over time, but it's extremely effective. Um, you just have to practice it like every day.
that's it. And I think, there's that kind of deeper purpose, isn't there, really, with, people. And as you mentioned, there's more to that person just doing that job, if that makes sense. And people aren't,
Hmm.
just people aren't robots. And people have their own lives and their own mental health and their own things going on. And it's like tapping into, getting people to tap into, their strengths, and, really looking at how they can progress, and, how their work is going, and that kind of communication, and having that empathy and understanding, isn't it, for that person in a person-centered way. And I think, like, a lot of businesses don't do that. And I think there are a lot more businesses now, though, who are kind of leaning towards that approach, because I think it's more highlighted now. I think, kind of how people are feeling, and I think how people feel, and, how they are on themselves, kind of, it can make a business grow. And I think it can also have the opposite effect, because it's like, if people aren't okay and they're not happy and they're stressed out, it's going to surely affect your business, and, how your relationship is with those people.
That's absolutely true, and I see it more in family-owned businesses
Mm.
because it's the family, the hired family, and then you have to have a conversation about why aren't we as effective, or the business owner also happens to be the grandfather of the family. It's like, oh, well, we have
Yeah,
to do this extra respect sort of thing. It's a harder conversation, but it's still one that needs to be had because you do have to challenge the mindset of that person, or that
yeah.
person has to challenge the mindset of the family, or, whichever is like, oh, I hired my grandkid just because they couldn't find a job anywhere else. That's
Mm.
not the reason to hire them.
Yeah,
Um, that's not going to make for a truly effective company. And that
yeah,
dynamic really can limit the growth of a place. And so it's good to have that outside perspective, to come
yeah.
in and say, yeah, okay, y'all
It,
related, aren't you?
yeah, yeah. I've definitely seen that in some places I've worked, like restaurants or places, and the boss has somebody who's, a cousin or a family friend or something like that. But, it was just kind of have a negative effect on, like, the business. But, like, I could see it, from a new employee. But, I think the owner deep down, could see it, but didn't want to fire them because they felt bad, or didn't want to do X, Y, Z. And I think, as you said, it can
Right.
have that negative effect, even though there might be, financially helping that person. But it's that kind of gap between, isn't it? And you see that on, like, Gordon Ramsay, that program where he goes to places and they've got problems in the business, and it's because, it might be a close relative or someone, but they don't want to fire them and all this, but they're losing yet, however much money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly true. And it can be also the person who is the business owner, that they're
Mm.
so controlling that they don't want anybody else's opinion or idea. And that's actually one of the leadership voices. You do need that person on your team. And the construct I follow, that person's called a pioneer, meaning that
Yeah.
they are all into results and very driven, which is wonderful because you want them to have that. They're very strategic in their thought process.
Mm.
They really don't care to gather anybody else's opinion on anything. And
Yeah.
so, as you can tell, that's going to be a detriment at some point. In the beginning, when they're starting up a company, that's fantastic because you need that drive. You need to push through no matter what, because,
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur is not easy. But then once you grow and you have some regular revenues it is good to have other opinions of, well, what can we do next? Or how can I be more profitable? Or because they maybe didn't go about it in the best way. They went about it in a way, their way.
Yeah.
And so having other people who ask questions, right? It's like, well, how are we going to do this? That's also a voice called a guardian voice. They like process, but they are also great at protecting resources. So if you've grown to a certain level, this guardian type of person is going to say, well, let's make sure we maintain that. So yes, they are a little risk averse, but that's a good thing because you need that to balance with the person's like, the heck with everything else. I'm just going to go do it. Well, you can go do it and you might actually not have a company when you're done. So you do need, right, this kind of checks and balances about it. And I know we're talking about entrepreneurs now, but I would say the same is true in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
If you've got somebody who's the head of a department and they're off and about and you're like, oh, how are we going to get this work done? They just made a bunch of promises that the rest of us have to fulfill. Right.
Yeah. I see it definitely. And I think that's why it's so important for like for meetings, do you think? To have those kind of like meetings where people can discuss how things are going and have that people share their different opinions and different perspectives on things to get that narrative from other people. Because I think like I've worked in some places and they never really did meetings, so like the same problems just kept on happening because it wasn't being discussed and it wasn't being dealt with. Would you say like they're pretty important? Like because like you said, it's that especially if the boss or the leader who's in charge is kind of stuck in their ways, and as you said, they're kind of driving the ship. That same person could also kind of sink that kind of business as well if they're not having these extra kind of opinions or like having that feedback where they can discuss things. And I think some people sometimes fear bosses or they fear the manager. It's like it's not the way to be. Like you think what fun is it to be in a place if you fear the manager coming in or the boss? I mean that's quite old fashioned, but that still happens in some places, and I've experienced that. And people think, oh, quick, look busy, the manager's here. And it's like, well, that's kind of part of your job, but there should be there should be that kind of balance, between it all.
Yeah, I agree. I'm laughing because when you said, "Oh, the boss is here," I do remember working at one spot where we were actually in different rooms but cubicles, and somebody would literally email everybody, "She's here." And it was like, uh-oh.
Oh gosh.
And everybody's all of a sudden sets the greater attention or something, or stops conversation, or they just literally about face whatever you were doing. You just felt like, it's uncomfortable. I should change what I'm doing because here she comes. And while that person had an aura of authority, which is helpful at times, because if you're in a meeting that's going sideways, you want somebody with authority so people kind of settle themselves a little bit. On the other hand, it was like too much, right? Because like, gosh, I can't even ask you about how is today going, or how's your weekend? Do you have any weekend plans? The social things seemed to be inappropriate or something she wouldn't tolerate, which is why the email came across. She's here, right? It went out to everybody. Yeah. So that's really bad for, for morale. And it creates that sense of entitlement that if she spoke to you, oh, you were special, right? And that shouldn't be, because she's actually in charge. She's in charge. I agree. But that as a leader, you don't want to put that I'm on a pedestal and you're beneath me, because it doesn't feel good and then you create this environment of, oh, everybody's trying to climb to be on the next pedestal or to be exactly like her. It was very toxic in that way. Not that some people actually did argue, right? When she wasn't around, they would argue and get into arguments about who was right and who was better. I'm like, yeah, that's not very helpful. We're here as a team to work together. So collaboration completely goes out the window when you create, as a leader, when you create that environment. So I always say, folks, whether you own the business, whether you're a department head or a team lead or whatever, take a look at yourself and say, wait a minute, what does this, if I'm on the other side of this, what does this feel like? Would I want to be part of that? Or when I was part of that in my past, did I enjoy it? Because now's your opportunity to change it. And I say that because I think a lot of us are products of what we've experienced. So we think, oh, once I quote unquote arrive, that's now my opportunity to repeat that process. And like, no, please don't. Right? Don't
Yeah.
make it the same as it was, because remember what it felt like. It wasn't great. And so how can we change it? And I think each of us has that opportunity to change it and to make things better, so that the next generation that comes up will never have to experience that. And it would have something that's like,
Mm.
oh, yeah, it's wonderful here. And now I'm a lead and I'm going to do this. And I just think we all have that obligation and responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point you mentioned, and I think it just shows you how it's so important to have that good, healthy kind of company and leadership and management and all of these things interlink. The people on the ground floor, the all the different layers of the business all kind of interlink, and it's like like there's that quote that people sometimes use, and it's like shit rolls downhill kind of thing. It's like it all has an effect. It's a bit like I think they call it the layer cake. It all kind of waters down if the boss is okay, if they're not okay, and it's going to affect all these different people. And it just shows you how important it is to have that healthy workplace, if possible. And it's just a lot better for everybody. I think we're kind of more so moving towards that. Like we're moving away from that kind of old kind of culture, if you know what I mean. That kind of, just say,
Mhm.
1980s, 80s. That um kind of robotic culture. But it's like you said, that person who's in that role, who might be being negative, might have experienced that in another place, or they've had that with someone they've worked with, and then they embody that, and and they think, oh, that's the way to be. That's strength. That's how you be as an authoritative figure. I think, yeah, you need to put you know, if you need to put your foot down, you need to put your foot down, but you don't have to be negative and to be a dick about things. It's that balance.
Mhm.
It's like when I worked in one place, the boss came in, you knew when he was there, he had that kind of aura, that vibe, but he wasn't negative. You just kind of
Mhm.
you had to switch on, but it wasn't a negative vibe. And there's that balance, isn't it? There's that difference where some bosses or owners, have got that vibe and that authority, and they're not negative, and there's that kind of spectrum of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think things are definitely changing now. You see more businesses, kind of a groundswell. In other words, they're starting from, I
Yeah.
don't, they may actually be starting from the, I don't want that culture where to get ahead I have to be seen, because that means I'm going to be here. I'm going to spend my entire life in the office. Who wants that? Now that we're
Mm.
remote, that changes a little bit, but still, it's the, I have to see you in order. It's that FaceTime. We call it FaceTime, not the app, but
Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
I see your face in the office space.
Yeah.
That the more I see you, I know you're working and you're going to get ahead. And that's not necessarily the case. So some people kind of fed into that, and I think that's old school, not in a good way.
Yeah.
That made things tick. I also think that your comment about people being basically an asshole, thinking that that's what they have to do to get ahead. That was also demonstrated to them, right? That that's what it would take. And then it continues. I would say as a woman, I had to one work in some environments that were all male. It makes it's a tougher dynamic for us sometimes because how do you get ahead? And some of the socialization things that happen while you don't participate in the same way. And then you do pick up characteristics that when you go to another company where it's not male dominated necessarily, um, you kind of exhibit characteristics that
Mm.
get labeled in a way that aren't helpful to you. Like, well, yeah, she gets her stuff done, but boy, she's the bitch. Who wants to work with her? It's not,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not particularly helpful in that. And again, that's the reason with teams I work on understanding you have to know yourself
Yeah,
first. You have
that's a
to know
good point.
yourself to lead yourself and then to lead others. You have to understand what you are doing and what your natural tendencies are, because some of them are fantastic and other ones are like, ooh, yeah. That's the reason people respond to you a certain way. You have to know that about yourself and have to be that. You have to be vulnerable enough to be reflective. Then that's a big step. And that's a huge step for a leader. And that's really what makes a leader versus a quote unquote manager. Because a
Mm.
manager just wants to know if you're there. Can I see your face? How you're doing stuff? Give me progress reports. I know this sounds micromanaging because that kind of goes to it, but it's more about, are you doing stuff, right? So they're more on the reporting and exactly details of every little thing. Are you getting your work done, right? Versus, are you growing? So are you getting your work done? That's a management question. Are you growing as a professional? That's a leader question. How can I help you grow?
Mm.
Leader question. Manager's not going to ask you that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that kind of like brings a lot of clarity to me. Like thinking back to places that I've worked, I think I was yearning for those kind of questions to be asked. And some managers I met, and they would ask those questions, because they would, they had that leader in them. They kind of was in that kind of space,
Mm-hmm.
whereas majority of the managers that I worked with, wouldn't ask that, and I think that's because that's something that I yearn for. I think that kind instead of just you just doing your job, how can I help? Where where you want to go with this? And it's like that arrow being pulled back, isn't it? I think that's the kind of like the difference to it. Like that they're supporting you in where you're at, and I think it's so important to have effective leaders. In the workplace, and I think people probably need to be educated on this, or these kind of like topics need to be, I think, highlighted a lot more, because I think it will address a lot of problems people may be experiencing. I mean, there's definitely people who might be listening to this who might be going through some of the things we spoke about, um, or they might have good leadership and management. I think there's completely like so many different spectrums of it, and it's so important that we have these kind of conversations, and that through the work that you do, it's having a positive impact.
Yeah, and it's work. It is a passion for me because I see the difference it can make in an individual and a team. So for your individual well-being and for the team's well-being, when it's embraced. I also see the opposite side of that when nobody wants to talk about it, or they're assuming it's done, or they leave it to HR to take care of. It's like some sort of HR project that they go to a workshop. It's like one and done. Like, oh yeah, I did that. Okay, yeah, I took that leadership course. Hmm. But did you practice it? Are you practicing it? Do you have somebody holding you accountable to make it a reality for yourself and for the people there? Because if not, you're really not. You're still back into where you were. You took a class. That's nice. This is about actually doing something and making a difference, because it makes a difference in everything you do. And I think it really changes your attitude personally, but then also for the team. And then it makes, I believe, because I'll say this for myself, it makes you better at handling the unexpected and being creative in what you can do to help the team achieve, or, to get out of some sort of issue. There's not really, there aren't showstoppers. There's not something that crushes you down. It's like, oh, I'm never going to resolve this, because you see the power of your team, you know them, you share it with them, but then you also get creative about, okay, what can we do? And so that, it just, to me, it's so powerful. And I see that, I see how it makes the difference. And I say the younger that you are, and if you can do this earlier on in your career or even your studies, because I would say university students is, it's a good thing to learn about yourself. Do it earlier so you understand how you can control the trajectory of your career, go in the direction you want, that really plays to your skills, and that you will love it, your career that you're developing. You're just going to enjoy it, and not get to the end and go, God, I wasted so much time. If I would have known that earlier, I would have changed some things. Yeah.
That's a really great point, and I think that's something that I've experienced in my life. I think by just trying different things out and gaining that experience and perspective by trying different things and working in lots of different places, different people, and just kind of trying things out to try and then find out what it is I kind of want to go into. And I think like sometimes people get scared of trying new things, and it's like your comfort zone and that kind of thing. But I think like the more you kind of do it, the kind of easier it becomes. But as you said, you want to try and find something that you enjoy and you have a passion for, and that kind of deeper meaning behind it. Because I know like we have to work and people have to do jobs and that kind of thing. But if you keep doing that thing and then keep tapping away at different things and just exploring it, you then can over time leave that thing that you might be doing to go into something else. And I think like it's so important that people try and find out what makes them happy. And I think with COVID, I think people have definitely started to look at that a lot more. I think a lot of people discover, I know loads of people who do discover different things or left their job and this kind of thing. So like as you said, I think a lot of it comes down to getting to know who you are, kind of asking yourself certain questions probably. Um, but no, I think you made some really great points. And I just thought to kind of like round up. Do you have any kind of like role models or mentors growing up or now?
Yeah, the mentors I look to are those that are entrepreneurs, but successful. I always call them successful leaders. So they've overcome some adversity to get where they are. Or they've grown a company from adversity. One of those people that I like to follow his name is Michael Hyatt. He used to be a publisher, and now he produces um, his own books and that sort of thing. But he was in a corporate job. He had issues with how it was projecting into its future. It wasn't, and then publishing books is much is shrunken over time as we get online, but you have to switch. So he took over an area that was really struggling, and then he came up with ways and techniques to get out of that. And now he has his own company that literally shows people how to be more productive with their time, and with planners and that sort of thing. But it's how his journey, from there. And he's known in certain aspects or areas of kind of, I would say, small to medium-sized business. I would also say, and kind of going with the celebrity type of thing, Oprah. I just her story of how she struggled in the
Yeah,
beginning, how people told her you don't belong here, and now she owns the here, right? She's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just make my own way. Thank you for telling me that. And
Mm.
one of the stories that I saw her speak is one of the things that she said was somebody when she moved to Chicago and they offered her her own time slot against Donahue, which at the time was huge, right? How are you going to compete against the legend? And they said, but you can, yeah, sure, you can own your show. You can own like some, high percentage of the show, sure, because they weren't
Mm.
expecting her to succeed, right?
Mm.
And I was like, uh-huh. So she said, I thank every person who's underestimated me because they put me where I am. And to me, that hits home so much because when we
Yeah.
talk about culture,
Mm.
to me, it comes back to that. It's every time somebody gives you a reason no, and you're like, okay, you think I can't do it? And you absorb that and use that as energy to go, no, I'm going to watch me.
Yeah.
Now I don't expect that I'll be ever ever close to an upper level person, but
Mm.
it's just but that mindset switch to collect all those. Oh, so you doubt me, do you? No, righty then. I'll
Yeah.
collect that and I'll use it. Use it for energy and a good way of positivity. Just drives
Mm.
you forward. So I just I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I think Oprah's a really good example as well. And I have to check out that other guy. And I think that's so true. As you mentioned, using that as energy and not dwelling on that and taking that, absorbing and believing that, oh, this is how it is then. It's kind of using that as, ammunition to kind of pull yourself forward in a positive way. And I think that's something that I've definitely experienced, doing, podcasting and kind of into going into this field, kind of starting out, like in kind of like entrepreneurship and kind of like, like coaching and podcasting, like you get, sometimes along the way, certain people might say things that aren't very nice, or people who kind of doubt you or may say certain things, and it can be a rough road if you like let that in. And I think you said you got to take that and use it as that kind of fuel to kind of push yourself forward in a positive way to kind of prove them wrong, if that makes sense. I think I spoke about it with my friend on a podcast, and he makes music, and he said that
Mm-hmm.
he's like use that as ammunition to prove them wrong, because he had a lot of
Yep.
people tell him certain things, and I think that's what you've got to do, isn't it? And I was just wondering, have you got any favorite books that you like to read?
I do actually, excuse me, related to mindset. Excuse me.
Yeah.
One is actually called Mindset by Carol Dweck,
Mm.
Dweck. And it shares the growth mindset and the scarcity mindset. And there's two different aspects and how they play out in your life and your thought process,
Mm.
how it can make a difference. So it's medium-sized book, probably 160 some pages. So it's not too bad
Yeah.
as far as reading.
I saw.
And I think great because I was like, what am I saying? Read Beowulf? No, nothing like that.
Yeah.
The other one that I really think that hits on what we were just speaking about is called Positive Intelligence, and I'm going to mispronounce his name. It's Shirzad Charmaine. I think it's how you say his last name. And
Yeah.
mm. it talks about the so the EQ, IQ, and then PQ, which is your positive, your personality intelligence, of what you know about yourself. Because you mentioned something a couple seconds ago about taking what people give you and feeding that into your brain. Well, this book talks about you have your own saboteurs that's set in your brain that have been fed by things that you've experienced over your lifetime,
Mm.
and they become stronger or weaker by what they're fed, and that creates your limiting thoughts, your limiting beliefs. And so knowing what those are, then you can learn how to adjust those or keep those voices quieter. As one of my friends said, this is your itty bitty shitty committee that's hanging out in your brain, that's doing stuff to you all the time. And I'm like, that's right. That's what they are. And I have two main ones that mess with me all the time. The rest are, just kind of hanging there going, yeah, all right. But for me, there's two. For other people, they're multiples. And I think he even has an online assessment that you can do really quick to see what your saboteurs are. But I think it's very powerful because those saboteurs take what people feed, comments that people feed in. So back to my Oprah example. She wouldn't let that be the soundtrack that went into her brain. She took it. It's like, oh, really? I'm going to flip it. It plays a different outcome for me, a different result. And I think that is what really helps us, move through our difficulties and reach, higher levels and potentials individually, as well as you can do it with a team. It's more difficult because you have to be super vulnerable to have that discussion with team members. But certainly it is one of those that takes practice. I was going to say I practice every day. It's like, oh, there that voices again telling me no. And I'm like, stop it. So those would be two I would recommend together.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate you talking about that. And I think it's so important, isn't it? It's kind of like what you feed, isn't it? What you feed into and what you give most attention to is kind of what's going to kind of grow the most, isn't it? And I think they're great examples. And I think, like I said, you have to be, self-aware and kind of go to that vulnerable place. And but I think like there's a lot of growth to be taken, from that by kind of, tuning into, looking at, what you're feeding into most. And I was thinking, like, where can people find you on, like, internet, website, social media, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So if you want to email me directly, which is fine because I love to talk about this topic, obviously, I could talk all day. Just email me at brenda@inspiringcompanyculture.com, all one word. If you want to see my website, it's still inspiringcompanyculture.com. You'll see that it'll show that, there's workshops, there's consulting work that I do with companies, teams, individuals. Anyway, it gives you a little sample there, but certainly email me. And actually, if folks email me, I will share a link for an assessment that they can do to find out what their 5 voices are, like their leadership voice order is. Yeah. Email me and I will send that. I will give that to you along with an explanation of what that is, because it gives you access to a platform, a professional leadership development platform that explains those and it definitely goes much deeper. It has, hundreds of, if not thousands of tools you can use with your team. And I can help guide folks through that. Like, this, don't use that, because it's like Netflix with all this stuff on there. You kind of need a guide to be effective and pick something that fits your need.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really great. And I'll definitely put your details in the description as well. Your email and things like that, and what you mentioned. But it's been a really, really great conversation with you, and I really appreciate being on the podcast. And I wish you all the best in what you're doing. It really, really means a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for the wonderful conversation. I think it's been great. Like I said, I could talk about this forever because I think it's so important and it's so powerful. It really makes a difference in people's lives. So thank you for bringing it to your audience. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Welcome. And it's been great talking to you. And I think it's so important to think about these things. So I think a lot of people, are all working in lots of different places, whether, that's for themselves or for other people, and different lines of work. And I think, we all experience kind of these things we mentioned at some point. I think people are very, very lucky if they don't kind of have issues at work or things like that. But I think everyone can kind of relate to it in their own way, and I think it's been really good. But yeah, no, I wish you all the best for today, and I'll speak soon.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care.
You're welcome.